Bam, we are recording to the cloud. All right, that was the first thing on my list of things to do, to be recording from the cloud. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome to week 2 of our 6-part corporate and leadership coach training series. And today we are going to talk about organizational dynamics and sometimes dysfunctions and how they actually go together. And we're going to talk about coaching some sticky leadership situations, which technically has a whole heck of a lot to do with the leadership dysfunctions and, you know, sticky stuff. And it's all kind of meshes together. So you're probably saying, where's the other half of Karen and Jen? Just a heads up, Jen is in Florida. She might jump on. And very good possibility that she's going to jump on at some point. And if she does, I got to tell you, I don't know how to get her in here. So she's going to have to figure out how to tell me how to do that. But she's taking care of her dad, and she's being a really good daughter and taking care of her dad. So I'm like, all right, no worries. I got this. So like I said, this should be fun with me doing the whole Zoom thing because it's not my forte. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share, we'll start right off the bat and see if we can actually get me to share my screen. Now we know that I don't have to share computer sound because I don't. Play from start. And all right, so question for you guys really quick. Could you see that screen? Could somebody just say, yes? Bam, we are golden. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, if anybody has any questions, anything at all, thank you for all the yeses. What I'd love for you to do is just hit me up in the chat box because I'm not going to work all the other things. So again, I'm Karen, and if you want to know more about me because you weren't here last week, well, go listen to last week's call, right? Be resourceful. Go listen to last week's call. You'll learn a little bit more about me. And my guess is that at some point today during this, however much time we have together, my guess is there might be a cop story that jumps in today. But Jen and I are the owners of KickStart Your Edge, and we focus on teams, leadership development, and we coach in corporate, we coach in organizations all around the world from California to Kuwait. And we're also founders of the Get Real Leadership Corporate Coach Training Program, which is magnificent. We just had our inaugural class last year. 26 stellar individuals left that with a certification as a corporate and leadership coach. So that was a lot of fun for us. And it's funny. We love leadership coaching. And it's funny. I would venture to say Jen lives coaching. I love it. She lives it. But what happens is that we've seen that with a lot of times, people are struggling. Right? People are struggling to get into corporations. And when they're there, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I got into this corporation. All this shit happens. And people get like, there's a lot of sticky situations. There's a lot of organizational dynamics that pop up. And there's a lot of dysfunction that comes with that. So what we want to do today, well, listen to me, I'm talking about what I want to do today, and you guys, what I want you guys to be involved with today, is helping kind of do a little bit of perspective shift on how leadership coaching works in organizations, because it can be a tricky space. And so often we see people go into what we call the fix-it mode. So they hear something that's going on sideways in a corporation, and they go, boom, I need to fix it. And what happens is it jacks you all up. And because you're not there to fix their problems. And people, do that surface coaching when that happens. They jump into the stories and it gets kind of painful. But and we understand too that corporations are about actions. They're wired for actions and they get paid for results. And we know that. And I promise I'll make all of this make sense in the next 45 minutes to an hour. So again, what we want to do is we want to try to help people have a little bit of a perspective shift and help see things in a different way. Now, speaking of seeing things in a different way, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you guys to type into the chat box. What do you see? So you can type it into the chat box. What do you see that I'm holding up? Pink paper, yeah, pink paper. Now, if I sat here and said to you guys, blank paper, square, not me, a pink rectangle blank. Now, if I sat here and said to you, that's, all right, yes, it's a note card, right? We get that, it's a rectangle-ish kind of shape. It's a cover for my face now. All right, so I'll put it this way, so it's not a cover for my face anymore. It's a bunch of different things, but if I sat here and said to you, now, BS, this is blue, what would you say? You'd say, okay, okay. If I'm like, no, seriously, like this is blue, and I see a bunch of lines, and I love it, Nancy. Are you colorblind? No, I'm not colorblind. Great question. What makes me see blue? Right? But the thing is I can have a pissing match, quite frankly, with you guys and say, this is blue, and I see lines. And you're going to say, are you crazy? Right? You're going to say, no, it's not on my screen. Why is it blue? How come? No. And I love it, Bill. No, I'm not drinking yet, although it is 5 o'clock somewhere and not here. But the thing is here is because from where you're seeing, all you can see is blue. Now, I love that, right, Lisa? Because my side is blue. And if you look really close, you can see the lines. Now, the reason why I just did that is because every single thing that we do is about perspective. So what is it that we see? So sometimes we're like, bam, it's pink. Sometimes we're, bam, it's blue. And sometimes if we just take a little bit of a different perspective and shift our perspective a little bit, we can see that there might actually be something else, right? So we want to see that there's something else actually going on there. So it's interesting because in corporations, that's what it's going to be about. It's going to be about helping people see different perspectives, helping people see different things. So let me jump in. Now, when you're coaching, I would love to know what creates a sticky situation for you. When you're coaching, what creates a sticky situation for you? And again, interactive part. A violation of boundaries. Okay. What else? Dismissive, aggressive behavior, resistance. Love that, Sharona. Sometimes it's interesting with the resistance too, because sometimes the resistance, it's asking, okay, wait a minute. Who's in resistance? Am I resisting, right? Or is the client resisting? And then what happens if they're resisting? Then sometimes I'm like, okay, great. What else can I actually pull up here? What is it that I can actually see? So this is great. All these great new messages coming in here. The resistance, my clients hunker down into victim mode, right? And it's interesting with that too. When they're in that victim mode, especially Diana, when they're in that spot and you are so not in that victim mode, sometimes like, all right, what the hell do I do with them? Or when they're not listening, resentments, digging in their heels, not being coachable, totally not being coachable. And it's interesting because sometimes when that pops up, they're like, what the hell are we even doing on the phone? If they're aggressive, if they want you to fix it. It's interesting because I had a client basically like, I just want you to tell me what to do. And it's funny because when that happens for me, I ask them how much are they about risks? Because for me, I take boatloads of risks. I would do all sorts of wacky, crazy things. And a lot of times your clients aren't like that. So helping them actually see that, what your idea is isn't necessarily what theirs would be. So we got someone that talks about something that I don't understand enough to ask a decent question about. Yeah, that hello, right? That's where the voice in your head that's an a-hole pops up. When they hit my stuff with their stuff, their client wanting to be told what to do. I love all these messages coming in, guys. Thank you so much. When the client shows up with, I got nothing today, right? And those things get frustrating too. So when we have these sticky situations, a lot of times it becomes a problem. And the problem for us is just like, as long as we can get out of our head and as long as we can basically say, okay, great. How do I want to take a step back here? How do I want to take a step back and say, all right, listen, I'm not in their story. I don't need to fix it. I don't have to go into the, oh my God, here's what their problem is, and I need to fix it. So that's the biggest thing with sticky situations, because you don't need to jump in and go, okay, great, I need to fix this. The big thing is, it's funny, instead of jumping in, it's about how do we take a step back? Because so many times, if I can move this forward, what this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is about people, right? Everything is about people. It's about helping you understand the dynamics, helping you understand different things about people. And our job, essentially, is to be masters at understanding their perspectives. And every single person has a different perspective. And the thing about this, too, is helping people get curious about their relationship to the issue, right? It's not necessarily the issue that we're talking about. So we all know this, right? Well, some people might not. The clients will come to you with something, but most of the time it's something else that they're actually really need to get coached on. Same things happens in organizations. Same things happen with teams. They come to you with one thing, but it's all, so many times it's about digging down. So what this is we want you to be masters in human behavior. And so what's their relationship to the issue? What's their worldview actually look like? How do they see things, right? What are their beliefs? And yes, it's the thing behind the thing, right? We're absolutely looking for that thing behind the thing. But we need to see what it is. So it's about getting insanely curious as to what's really going on. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you a couple of different situations that some people might consider a little bit sticky when it comes to organizations. And I have two different organizations that I'm going to talk about. But the first things first, when I say organizational dynamics, actually, here's a slide. When you hear organizational dynamics, what comes to mind for you? Relationships, love that. Yep. What else? How people interact, depends on who says it. The interplay of energy and personalities, how people interrelate, big meetings, different minds, culture, interaction, politics. Yes, politics. Whether they're aligned, interactions between people. And you know what the funny thing is that with organizational dynamics, I Google shit all the time. So right before this call, I actually Googled organizational dynamics, because I know that, we put this slide in here about organizational dynamics and what comes to mind. And when I Googled organizational dynamics, 66,300,000 results popped up in 0.55 seconds. So no wonder things are all over the place. No wonder things are kind of sideways. No wonder we're sometimes scratching our heads going, what the hell's up with these organizational dynamics? So the thing here is we need to ask the people that we're working with, what does organizational dynamics mean to them? And sometimes the dysfunctions, right? And even the office politics that I think that maybe Scott brought up. But the big thing about that is it's understanding, right? If there's office politics that are going on, if there's organizational dynamics and dysfunctions, what does it mean? What does it really mean to them? And then how do we help them start to use that to benefit them instead of being some kind of thing that's kind of getting in their way? And it's funny because Jen and I talk a lot about, we talk about office politics. And I like to change that, because I have to tell you, not all office politics is bad. There's some really, really good office politics that go on that propel organizations. The thing is the office politics has a really weird kind of stigma to it. So what we want to do is we want to think a little bit more about political intelligence. So if you can flip from office politics to political intelligence, it actually even has a better sound to it. So organizational dynamics, what we want you to do is we want you to have conversations with the teams that you're working with the organizational organizations that you're working with and help them see what this actually means to them. Because if things are working, let's stick with it. And if they're not working, let's see what we can actually ditch from that. Now, we're going to go into our first scenario. Now, scenario number one, and we're going to do a couple of these. I'm going to read this out loud because I'm not sure if some people are dialing in from the phone. And also, just a heads up again, guys, if anybody's hitting me up with a Q&A, I can't see that because my made-up story is that that's what keeps locking my screen up. So I'm not playing with the Q&A thing. But if you want to hit me up in the chat box, I will be more than happy to to read those and answer those and see what's popping up in the chat box. So true scenario here. Jen and I are working with this organization. The sales were not where they should be. Compared to where they were in the year, not where they should be. Their current strategy that the team was working with was not aligning with the direction of the business. Their solution at this point was to merge two groups during an insanely high volume season. All right. Now, what happened was with this restructuring, there were two leaders of two teams with two different agendas, essentially overseeing the same thing. Now, the two leaders, let's call them Joe and Bob, agree upon the actions, but what would happen is Joe would do what he wanted and Bob would do what he wanted. Okay, so we have she in there. The national top level people, essentially what they were doing, they were creating redundancy. And the SVP made a commitment at this point not to make any decisions till after the holidays about who would lead or actually what would happen. So uncertainty was all over the place. Now, if this was you, if this was your team, so Jen and I are coaching, we're coaching this group of people. What would you do? So this is your your scenario. What actually would you do here? Create multiple team ground rules. Wait till after the busy season. Is a missed opportunity. Okay. What else, guys? What do you think you'd do? Because we have these two leaders, right? And I'll just give you a little background too on the two leaders. These two leaders have worked together for years. They worked together on another project. They worked together on another team. They both got promoted and both went to different places. So they're friends. They have, a relationship with each other. So I can give you a little bit, that might help a little bit, or maybe even not. Look for a quick win. Where do they already align? Love that. Give specific roles for each leader. Bring in a transition model. Find strategies on how to live in the neutral zone. Okay, interesting. Understand both approaches and create a unified plan. Ask a bunch of questions to get more information about the issues. Yeah. Set an alliance. Yeah, love that, Kathy, right? So figuring out what's the alliance. I want to clarify what the organization is looking for as far as a coaching agreement. Use their, I like that, right, Diana? Use their friendship to get what's in it for me. The goals and the culture for the new team. Are we coaching the SVP or the two leaders? That's a great question too. And in this case, we're actually coaching the two leaders. What are the goals for the team and not the individuals? What's what worked for them in the past? Look for points of agreement, disagreement. Ask each of the two leaders about their goals and values. I gotta tell you guys, love these answers. And so here's what actually happened. I'll tell you that what happened here, the dynamics were really changing here, and people were freaking out because one of the leaders now started to have her inner critic messages popping up that was just like, oh crap, I'm gonna get fired, right? Because she started creating stories. So this was a great example of helping, in this case, one of the people not to make stuff up. So what had to happen in this situation, what we needed to do was help them shift their perspective. because what was happening is they're actually jockeying for positions. Now, one of the people was freaking out a little bit more than the other person was freaking out. So what happened here was I actually had a conversation with her. So we're gonna stay away from Bob and Joe since we got she's on here. So I had a conversation with her. And essentially what happened during that conversation, it was essentially doing a lot of the things that you guys actually said. And based on their past relationship was the key. So what we worked on was, what was it that she wanted to say to this other person? This is all about her. What did she want to say? How did she want her voice to actually be heard? And the biggest part about it is, what could they agree on? So this here is what we do, is we want to help them figure out what can they agree on. So as to, high level people in this organization, how do we have them align with something bigger than themselves? So it's not about what this one wants. It's not about what this one wants. But what it is about what actually does the team need. And what happened was that at one point when Jen and I had worked with this team, we talked about, when they were both on another team together, we talked about how to have conversations. And the old school approach essentially is, okay, great, we're going to go into a conversation. You're going to think one thing, I'm going to think something else. So there's going to be the agreement and the disagreement before we pop up. Kathy Walters, that's not even funny using coin. But yeah, she could use coin. But then we want to get them to understanding. And then from the understanding to the acceptance and alignment. And that a little bit, like I said, that's the old school thought here. Because why? In the beginning, there's too much agreement, or actually too much disagreement on what they both want. So they're both jockeying for position, right? It's like, no, I want it this way. No, I want it this way. And then they would get a little bit of agreement, and then one would do something else anyway. So what we started to talk about, and what I connected one of these women back to, was the disruptive approach to the conversation that she was going to have with the other person. So what could we do to, right from the beginning, align on what it is that they're trying to accomplish as a team? And this was the key pieces here, guys, because if we can get them to get, even agree with each other 2%, and they can agree on that, and they can align on that, and they can accept that, and we build that trust, because these two people had a lot of trust in the past until there was, the inner critic voices started popping up. So we need to make sure that they get out of the weeds and understand, so what's going to be the best thing for this division. So again, it's not what person A wants, it's not what person B wants, but what we did, and some people call it the third entity, but at the top, like, what does this third entity need? This is a side note too, guys. You could use this in any kind of coaching. You could use this with business partners. You could use this with cross-functional teams. You could use this with relationship coaching. And what it is, it's not what this person wants. It's not what this person wants, but what does the relationship really need? Because when we can take the egos out of it, what happens is it starts to get some of the, some of the muck out of the way, and we can focus on what's really working, right? So the interesting thing is, we didn't have to, in this case, redefine this thing on the top. What it was how do we stay connected to the vision? How do we stay connected to what's important to the team? How do we make sure that we can form that connection with these two people? And it was interesting because one of the values of this company is about creating wins for their team. And that was a huge thing that pulled it in. So when you're working with different organizations, if you can help them connect to their values, if you can help them connect to what's really important, and if you can get them to align on that, it's going to be a whole hell of a lot easier than trying to push a boulder up a hill and trying to sit here and going back to the old way because you're fighting and you're butting heads with that agreement and disagreement in the beginning. So in the beginning, if you can create that alignment, think about that third entity, what it is that we can agree on, even if it's 2%, right? Then we can get the understanding. Then what happens here is we're creating, like we talked last week, we're creating the trust. And with the trust is going to be a better way for people to actually then have those conversations with agreeing and disagreeing. So in this case, the cool part about it was that it was how we can come up with different questions for this individual so the two of them can have a really great meeting. So what we actually helped this one woman do was to get in alignment with the other woman, and then basically they came up with the things that were important to them. And then what happened was, this was even better, then she had said, you know, the meeting went great, what exercises could we do as a team? So that went even better, right? So then what happened then, of course, now I'm all about, okay, great, let's get fun, let's do all sorts of good things. So what we want to do is we want to get them to now, as the teams, get into flip charts, what solutions, what strategies, what things can we anchor to. So then it was about helping them actually understand each other, helping them actually see each other's perspective, and actually helping the team move forward. So this is about then asking yourself, so I know that Jen and I have talked about this different times, but what's that helicopter view? Because when you're stuck in the weeds, you're not going to see anything, right? You're not going to see anything if you're down with them. What's the dynamic that actually really happening, right? What needs to shift, right? So as a coach or as a facilitator of a different conversation, what's the perspective that needs to shift, or what's the awareness that needs to be created to get them where they're actually going? Great question, Eric. Did I meet with the individuals separately before I met them together? Yes. And in this case, it was because I had coached one of them in the past, and she essentially called me. You know, she shot me an email. She was like, hey, I'm going into freak out mode. I need some help. And that was essentially what happened. I was like, great, let's have a conversation. And then talk to the other one. Great, let's have a conversation. And the funny thing was that they both want the same thing, but it was just helping them see each other's perspective and having that conversation. And it was just so much easier that way. So was this work, question here, was this work with the two leaders or also into their organization? So we do a lot of work with their organization. And we've been with their organization probably for, I guess, wow, crazy, maybe 2 years now. And what it is we do a lot of work with a lot of different teams. So what happened was, during one of the times that we were doing work with one of the teams, we met these two women, and then these two women now have their own team. So it's kind of like we started doing work with marketing, and then what happened was sales was like, hey, we want to do some of that too, and then HR was like, hey, we want to do some of that too. And then the executive leadership team was just like, hey, well, if all these people are doing it, we're going to do it too. So we have a relationship with so many different people from this organization that we actually created a program for them that we call Personal Power Time. And we're actually on retainer for them. So if anybody in this one division of that organization has any shit going sideways, they email Jen and I, and then we set up a 30-minute conversation with them. So yes, we work for the organization, but also we work for individuals and we work for teams. What were the questions that you asked so they had a great meeting? The big thing here, Bill, that's a great question, is what can they agree on, right? What can they agree on? What are the things that, and I like them to come up, anytime when I have a conversation with two people, I want them to come up with some ground rules first. So I start things off with, okay, great. How do you guys want to show up in this meeting? What do you want some ground rules to be? And the great thing is they create the ground rules. They're more aligned to the ground rules because they've created them. But yeah, then essentially after they come up with all their ground rules, then it's just like, okay, I talk a little bit more about the vision. Then I talk about what can they agree on. Then I talk about what the big picture is. I even say to them, I draw a triangle and say, okay, great. We're going to take you out of the situation. We're going to take you out of the situation. What does this team need? And have them brainstorm a list of all the things that the team needs, because that's a cool way, because the two of them are doing it together. It's not individuals anymore. It's what does the team need? And I say, we're going to leave the egos on the shelf and we're going to figure out what does this team actually need. And the truth was, the team actually needed, at that point, they needed collaboration. They needed two leaders that were actually going to work for the team, not button heads against each other. Does that make sense? You don't have to say yes or no. I hope that makes sense. Okay, cool. So the biggest thing here is you don't want to say, how do I fix this? Because you want them to fix it. You want them to come up with solutions. You want them to come up with ideas. You want them to come up with how this is actually going to work, because then they're going to be more bought into it. So this again, Jen and I threw this up here last week, but this is the model that we came up with. And if you think about this, right, in this case, they really wanted us for was communication and real leadership. But what we did, right, and we, again, on the blue, we work on the blue on the outside, but what we do here is then we go in. So we're doing the work from the inside out. So what we did was we had, and these guys knew a lot of the concepts that Jen and I teach, about your thoughts, about your feelings. It's funny, I'm pointing to my screen like you guys can see my freaking screen here. Your thoughts, your feelings, the actions, the results, all of those things, right? So we talk about those things so they understand it. So then what we can do is we can align on the values. What are their beliefs and perspectives that they can agree on as leaders? Where might they be a little bit off? How can we connect them to the purpose? How do we help them actually see the big picture? So we use the gray to actually align with the value of that the company had about winning, right? About a win for the team. And that was huge, because when we could connect them to the win for the team with their own values and what's really important to their teams, things started to actually shift a little bit for them. So what I'm going to do now for a sec, guys, before I get into my next potential sticky situation, I want to just stop for a sec and I want to just answer any questions that anybody has about that scenario or about this model itself. So just give you guys a second to type. Good questions. Good. I'm glad you love it. Hey, Scott. All right, cool. So you know what? Then we're just going to keep going. So you know what's funny, guys? Just as a side note, like, I don't know what Jen sees when she runs this Zoom thing. But I got to tell you, I feel like I see a lot more than what she sees. So just a side note, just in case anybody's curious about Zoom. But I'm getting a Zoom education right now. Okay, so here, scenario number 2. And again, I'm going to read it out loud just in case we get some people on the phone. This is another organization that we've been working with probably for, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years now. And it's a family-based business with the top values of loyalty, service, and trust. One employee has been there for 30 plus years. The role that this employee has is she's an assistant to like one group, and she's a personal assistant for one of the owners of the company. So now just a little explanation on that. She's part of a group and she does some work with one group, and she's also the personal assistant for one of the owners. Now, she calls in sick to work a lot. She's not focused on her job that much. She performs at a substandard level. Not essentially the most reliable person. Some people may say she could be undependable. Now, the thing here is the owner made a decision to keep her on as part of the organization, even though the owner knows what's up with her. Now, the rest of the team is frustrated. They want her to be more reliable. They want her to be more accountable. And they talk to each other about it all the time. So, coach is, what would you do? So type it into the chat box. What would you do? So that's a great question, right? So for this case, we're coaching the team, right? We're coaching the group, and she's part of the group. Check out what's up with the employee. The owners need the perspective of the rest of the team. Be curious to find out what's going on with her, understand why they want to keep her, how she embodies the core values. I would ask the owners why they hold this employee to such a different set of expectations. What's the owner scared of not confronting her? Play a group game. Talk to the owner to understand his reasons for keeping her. How can they call her in rather than call her out? Well, that's interesting. I think the owner has different insights into this employee. Has she always had these issues, or is this something new? I would ask, what's the benefits to tolerating it? How does it impact the company as a whole? If you embrace the definition of assertive, what would that behavior look like for you? Ask the team what's important to them and what they want at a high level. That's a great question, Tom. Conversations needed between the owner and the group. What's the need for the good of the company? Ask the owner what his goal is, what agreements are in place. Meet with the owner and uncover the values. Call her out. Set up these are great guys. Set up community agreements. In the triangle, right? In the triangle model, what's best for the organization and take themselves out? Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Given she's been there for 30 years, I'd be curious about what's changed if she hasn't been like this for 30 years. Consider flexible hours. How does the owner rationalize it? I also like the benefits and consequences of the situation. Working with the whole team, get them to work on defining the team vision, the purpose, the values, and what they were prepared to do to achieve that. So this is great. This is great. This is great. So what happened here was it's kind of funny. We had a meeting with the team, and she didn't show up. So it was great to actually, what happened was we worked with the team minus her. And essentially, you know, and it's funny because we don't do work with the owners. So, and I love that some people brought up getting the owners involved. If that's going to happen, my recommendation would be to have, because if you don't have that direct line to those owners, is the people that you're working with, how do you set them up to have a successful conversation with the owner? If that's the route you want to go. If you don't feel like they've done that in the past, or they haven't done that in the past. But the thing here, guys, is the whole thing is about expectations. This whole thing is about expectations and how do we actually work with it. Because I'll fast forward this a little bit, actually rewind this a little bit, and the group has essentially talked to the owner, and the owner is basically says, that's her, she's here, we're not changing it. So, which could cause, right, a lot of frustration for this group because they're doing their thing, they're moving and grooving, they're making a lot of progress, and they're getting a lot of things done, and they just have this personal assistant out here, this part of the group that doesn't kind of fit. So what we essentially did with this team was we came up with ways that what they were looking for was they didn't want to be frustrated anymore. They wanted to come to a place of peace. They wanted to get to a place of of acceptance. And if they weren't frustrated, what we help them see is what can we actually do with their energy. If they weren't frustrated and focused on her, what is it that we could do to actually help them as a team? So what we essentially did was we removed her from the equation. And I'll tell you guys, it wasn't easy at first because it is about expectations. And some of you guys know my story about the hardware store for milk. And what happens is every single day, and for those of you that heard it, well, you get to hear it again. And for those of you that haven't heard it, this is a great thing to think about when you're coaching people around expectations. So this team wants this woman to show up different. And she's not. She's not going to show up different. And what happens is every time she shows up the way she shows up, they get disappointed. They get frustrated because their expectations haven't been met. So what I mean about the hardware store for milk is it's just like and I understand that some people might live in some states where you actually do get milk at the hardware store. But in New Jersey, we don't. So let's say I go into the hardware store today and I say to the guy, I was like, hey, yeah, I want a gallon of milk. He looks at me like I get 3 heads and he says, I don't have any milk. He goes, you're going to have to go to the grocery store, go to 7-Eleven, go to Wawa, go to Quick Check. He goes, I got hammers, I got nails, but I don't have any milk. And I'm bummed. I'm like, seriously? You don't have any milk? He's like, no, I don't have any milk. Go somewhere else. Now I'm frustrated that I got to go back in my car and I'm disappointed, but I set myself up. I went somewhere to get something from somebody that doesn't have it. And so then I go home, and the next day I go back to the hardware store. And I say to the guy, hey, do you have any milk today? And he looks at me like I get 3 heads, and he's just like, listen, he goes, you were here yesterday. And he goes, I don't know what's up with that. And he goes, we don't have milk here. Go get a cow, go get a goat, go do something. Make almond milk. I don't have any milk. And I get frustrated again. But what happens is how many times in your life or in your client's life do you go try to get something from somebody and they don't have it? So what needs to happen is we need to help people figure out what it is about their expectation and how they actually set themselves up for success. They set themselves up for disappointment every single time? And I love that, right? Expectations, yeah, they're mental traps. So what we need to do is we need to redefine expectations. And hey, this is how she's going to show up. She is not going to change. So what is it that we actually want to do to change? And they vented a little bit, and then they came up with some solutions on their own. And that's the biggest part of this one. They need to come up with the solutions on their own. We were on the phone with them, brainstormed a bunch of different things on how they were kind of make jokes of it with themselves, like not making fun of her jokes, but it was just like, hey, this is what this is, and we understand that this is what this is, and we are not going to change it. So how do we get to that place of, instead of feeling like we're frustrated and our expectations aren't met, how do we get to acceptance? And it doesn't just happen overnight, and it takes a little bit of work, but getting to that place of acceptance. All right, let me do a time check here. It's 12:43. Okay. Questions, thoughts about this? What have I done differently if she had shown up for the meeting? So that's a great question, Sarah. And I don't know if the topic would have come up if she showed up for the meeting, because part of her thing is not showing up for the meeting. But if this was something that they wanted to talk about as a group, we would certainly do it. There's a thing that we do a lot of times when we feel like there's an elephant in the living room, and we do this in a lot of different companies. We do what we call index card exercises. And so everybody has a voice. We say, okay, we'll have a conversation with people. Okay, great. What's working really well with this team? And everybody will throw out their ideas. And then what we say too is, okay, great. What's not working? And let's do that part of this on index cards. And then we collect the index cards so nobody can try to do any handwriting analysis. We collect the index cards, and then we essentially read out what's the things that aren't working well. And then we help them prioritize the things that aren't working well. And then we help them figure out, okay, what are we going to tackle first, and how can we help them tackle whatever it is that they're going to tackle first. Let's see, how do you coach around, we can change our perspective, but we still have a block in our way of success. The interesting thing, Kath, is sometimes we could use the blocks as ways to get really creative. And that's what they actually did. They worked on ways to get really creative, and it wasn't actually a block anymore. And the thing here, and it's interesting, Suzanne, but by keeping a low-performing employee, the morale could suffer. But that's the thing that we wanted to empower this team to basically say, okay, great, this is what this is. This isn't changing, so how do we make this work? A little bit tricky at first, but the good thing about it was this group was open to trying something different because they knew that she wasn't going anywhere. Once you come to acceptance, is that letting her off the hook to show up and produce? No. And that's the thing too. It was, how did they want to start to have perhaps some of the leaders in this group, how do they want to have some different conversations, but also knowing that things might not change? But what different conversations can they actually come up with? Sacred cow issue in a small family-owned business. Yep. So, and we didn't coach the owners because, truthfully, I don't even know if the owners know that we coach the group. When using the index card exercise, has it ever turned into a personal approach? Example, dumping on one person. If yes, how would you handle that? And yes, that did happen one time. And basically it was like, okay, great, let's gang on the sales manager. And what we did was we flipped the whole thing around. Instead of let's gang up on the sales manager, let's help the sales manager. So all the things that people complained about this guy, it was like, let's, pound the hell out of him. What we did was to say, listen, obviously this guy needs some help. So how do we as a team really, really rally and help him? And in what ways can we help him? Because he was completely overwhelmed. He was in a spot where he felt like he was banging his head against the wall. He knew he was dropping a bunch of balls. So the thing was, he really did need help. So that's how we got that to get them to rally around that. The circle model to this scenario. Yeah. So if we think about here, go back to this approach, right? So how do we create the alignment? Okay. How do we create some alignment? How do we get really resourceful? All right. How do we really trust each other? And this group really, really trusted each other a lot. And then we tied that into really aligning to the values and the beliefs and the perspectives of the people and of the company. So that's a great question. So what we're going to do here, in the interest of time, it is 10 of the hour. Questions, thoughts, comments about anything that we just did. Be more than happy to answer them. And then remembering that part 3 is Thursday, January 10th at noon Eastern time. So Thursday, January 10th at noon Eastern time. So what other questions do you have? Or maybe even see that I missed any questions that somebody might have had, because these came through really quick. So I'll just hang for a sec. All right, we're getting nothing, guys. I'll wait for about 2 minutes before we, and actually, you know what I could do too? I could stop sharing this screen. Oh, and wow, now I can see all the people that are on the call. All right, so I'm still confused as to why the owners were not coached as well. That's a great question. Big thing here is we don't have any contact with the owners. But what we do, and this is a great point that you brought up here, what we do when we don't have contact with the people that sometimes might be perceived as the problem, what we do is we do a thing called coaching up. So we arm, in cop words, right? We arm our clients with the skills and the tools that they need to have difficult conversations with the people that they report to about how they can actually coach up, since we don't have any contact at that level. So the big thing here is really, really understanding, it's really, really understanding then how do we make that connection. So yeah, nothing with the owners. We just want our clients, even if we have to brainstorm and help them figure out what are some questions that you need to go to this person with to get some clarity. We do that all the time. Let's see. You're a sweetheart, Kathy. Still confused why the owners are. Just did that. You said you prioritize what's not working. Oh, okay. So when we have different conversations with the groups, we will have, like, a lot of times we have them, we are queens of flip charts. So we will put flip charts around the room and we would have them brainstorm all the things that are working really, really well with the team. So it gets them all pumped up, gets them all excited, gets them like, okay, great, this is, and they get fired up. And then what we actually do is like, all right, great, we have them fired up, and we're like, listen, while you're still pumped up, we still want you to now tell us what's going sideways. And we want them to tell us what's going sideways, and we give them index cards. Because people aren't, in a lot of situations, especially in the beginning when you're working with a team, people aren't going to be very vocal about what's going sideways. Like, what is the elephant in the living room? And what happens here is it gives every single person the opportunity to jot down what's not working. We just did this last week or 2 weeks ago with an organization, and they came up with a laundry list of things. And then what we actually did was we helped them prioritize what's the 3 most important things on this list that we need to focus on as a team. And they come up with the things. It works really, really well. It gives everybody a voice, and then you're not calling people out. Now, there's another time, too, I got to tell you, where there was another crazy, sticky situation. We were doing a teamwork thing, and the leader of the team actually got up and left. And at first I thought he was going to the bathroom or something. And then the person that's right underneath him came up to me. She's like, where did he go? And I'm like, I have no idea. She's like, this is a little bit weird and uncomfortable that he's not here. So I left, and I had worked with this guy a little bit in the past, and I left to go find him. So I'm walking down the hallway, and he's in this office with 2 other people. And I just stood there, and I'm like, what are you doing? And so he stands up, and he was just like, they needed me. So I just said to him, I said, seriously? I said, you have just become the elephant in the living room. Let's go back and figure this out. Now, you have to be okay with having those kind of conversations. I mean, here's a really high level guy in this, very, very, like a billions and $billion $company. And I'm like, you're the elephant. We need to fix this. So basically what we did, we came back in, and him and I are walking down the hallway. I said, listen, we're going to use this as an example to grow. I said, and you got to work with me here, and I might put you on the spot. And he was fine with that. So we went back in, and I said to him, all right, so here you go, guys. We have the elephant in the living room. He's back. And now we're going to have a little discussion about what happened. And actually what happened was he got a text message from 2 of his other people that really needed help. And what happened was he couldn't say no. And every single person around that table understood enough about this guy that he really had a problem saying no. And so we really helped the team understand why he left. And then I worked with him individually about how to learning to say no. So you'll encounter all sorts of different funky, sticky situations. And they help you grow. And the cool thing is don't jump in. Don't try to fix it. And when you want to jump in, take a step back. All right, guys and gals, it is 5 of the hour, and we're going to call this a wrap unless there's anything else. And again, you have my email address, Karen at Kickstart Your Edge. You have Jen's email address at Jen at Kickstart Your Edge. And thank you, sending you guys a high five too. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience with just doing the chat thing and not having people talk. Totally appreciate it. And we will catch you on the 10th. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. Post Happy Hanukkah to everybody. and enjoy the holiday season. And we really, really love you being in our world. Take care. Bye-bye.